The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Light from a dying star poured through windows that had been carved from single pieces of diamond. 947 species had sent their representatives here, beings of light and shadow, creatures made of living metal, entities that existed as clouds of conscious gas. They had gathered to decide the fate of humanity. High Arbiter raised his crystalline arm. The chamber fell silent. His species had ruled this assembly for 10,000 years, and when he spoke, galaxies listened. "The vote is complete," he announced. His voice carried through translator nodes that converted his words into 1,000,000 languages simultaneously. By a margin of 812 to 135, the motion has passed. The species known as humans are hereby exiled from galactic civilization. They are stripped of all rights, all trade agreements, all transit permissions. They have one standard cycle to remove themselves from all territories beyond their home system. Ambassador Daniel Harper stood alone at the human delegation's platform. He was 64 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. He had spent 30 years trying to earn humanity a place among the stars. Now he watched that work burn. The other delegations did not look at him. Some celebrated quietly. Others simply turned away as if humanity had already ceased to exist. "May I address the assembly?" Daniel asked. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled at his sides. His compound eyes flickered with something that might have been contempt. "You have lost that right. Your species has been judged. The matter is closed." Daniel straightened his jacket. It was a small gesture, almost meaningless among beings who did not wear clothes, who did not have bodies in any human sense. But it helped him feel like himself. "Then I will simply say this," he replied. "You believe you are removing a threat from the galaxy. You are wrong. Not about us being a threat. You are wrong about what threatens you." He turned and walked out before anyone could respond. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber, growing fainter until the great doors sealed behind him. Back on Earth, the news spread within minutes. Every screen, every device, every communication network carried the same message. Humanity had been exiled. The galaxy had voted them out. The reaction was immediate and violent. Protests erupted in Beijing, New York, Mumbai, and 100 other cities. People flooded into the streets, some carrying signs demanding war, others weeping with fear. Governments convened emergency sessions that collapsed into chaos. Military commanders shouted about retaliation while scientists begged for calm. The world had never faced anything like this. For 70 years, humanity had been part of something larger than itself. They had traded with alien merchants, studied at alien universities, served on alien ships. They had believed they were building a future among the stars. Now that future had been taken away. In a quiet office in Geneva, Admiral watched the chaos unfold across a wall of screens. She was 63 years old, small and precise, with silver hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded the first human warship to successfully fight an alien vessel. She had negotiated treaties that the Assembly had later torn apart. And she had spent the last decade building something that no one else knew existed. Her secure communication device buzzed softly. "Admiral, Director has arrived." "Send him in." Entered without ceremony. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and bald, with the look of someone who had not slept properly in years. He ran the most classified program in human history, a project that had consumed $3 trillion and destroyed the careers of anyone who asked too many questions. "They voted yes," said. "It was not a question." I watched the broadcast, sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk, looked pleased with himself. He usually does, turned away from the screens. "It's time for Project Exodus." Was silent for a long moment. "We're not ready. The fleet is only at 70% strength. The colonial evacuation plans haven't been tested. The target systems haven't been surveyed in person." I know. If we rush this, people will die. People are going to die no matter what we do. Pulled up a star chart on her main display. It showed a region far beyond the borders of galactic civilization, a vast emptiness that the Assembly had never bothered to explore. The Void March. 17 candidate systems, all surveyed by unmanned probes over the last decade. 3 of them have planets that could support human life without terraforming. Studied the chart. That's 8 months of travel at maximum speed, longer for the slower ships. Then we start moving now. The Assembly will notice. Fleet movements of that scale can't be hidden. Smiled and there was no warmth in it. Let them notice. What are they going to do? Exile us twice. For the first time in weeks, almost laughed. The planning began that night. Messages went out through secure channels to every human colony, every military installation, every hidden facility that the Assembly did not know existed. The word was simple: come home. Come home now. On Mars, Governor Samuel Drake received the message while standing in his office, looking out at the red desert that humanity had spent 50 years transforming. 3 million people lived under the domes of his colony. They had built lives here, raised children, buried their dead in Martian soil. Now they had to leave. How long do we have? His aide asked. 6 months, maybe less. That's not enough time. Then we'll make it enough. Samuel turned away from the window. Start the evacuation protocols and tell the people the truth, all of it. They deserve to know what's coming. On distant station, Commander Lisa Martinez received the same message. Her station orbited a gas giant at the edge of explored space, monitoring shipping lanes that would soon belong to no one. She had 40 ships under her command, vessels that the Assembly believed were simple cargo haulers. They were not. Lisa opened a secure channel to her captains. You've all seen the news. You know what the Assembly has decided. What they don't know is that we've been preparing for this day for 10 years. Every ship in this fleet has been modified. Every crew has been trained for extended operations. Every hold has been designed to carry not cargo but people. She paused, looking at the faces on her screen. They were afraid. They had every right to be. In 6 months, we're going to disappear. We're going to take our families, our friends, everyone we can carry, and we're going to leave this galaxy behind. And when we're gone, when the Assembly thinks they've finally gotten rid of us, we're going to build something new, something better, something that belongs only to us. She cut the channel and turned to her window. The gas giant hung in the darkness, its storms swirling in patterns that had existed for millions of years. Humanity had been given a death sentence, but they had never been good at dying. The real work was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the vote. The galaxy expected humanity to be falling apart. They expected panic, desperation, chaos. They expected to watch a young species die slowly, unable to accept its fate. They had badly underestimated their enemy. The colonial evacuation moved with a precision that would have stunned any observer. Ships that the Assembly had dismissed as primitive cargo haulers revealed their true nature. Hidden compartments opened to swallow entire settlements. Engine cores that had been deliberately limited suddenly ran at full power, crossing distances that should have taken weeks in mere days. On the mining station above Europa, Chief Engineer Cole watched the last transport depart. The station had been home to 8,000 workers, men and women who had spent their lives pulling precious metals from Jupiter's frozen moon. Now it was empty, stripped of everything useful, left as a hollow shell for the Assembly to find. That's the last of them, his assistant reported. The station is clean. Nodded slowly. He had lived here for 20 years. His wife was buried in the memorial garden on Deck 7. Leaving felt like abandoning her. Set the charges, he said quietly. Sorry. We're not leaving anything they can use. Set the charges and get to the shuttle. I'll trigger them myself. The explosion lit up the darkness above Jupiter like a second sun. Watch from his shuttle as the station broke apart, its pieces scattering into the void. The assembly would find nothing here but debris. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Colonies were emptied, their populations loaded onto waiting ships. Factories were dismantled, their machinery packed into cargo holds. Research stations transmitted their final data bursts before going dark forever. And the fleet gathered. Commander Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the Constellation, flagship of what humanity was now calling the Exodus Fleet. 200 warships hung in formation between Earth and Mars, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor. These were not the converted freighters that humanity had used for decades. These were purpose-built vessels of war, constructed in secret shipyards hidden beneath the lunar surface. "Ma'am, the Defender is requesting permission to join formation." Lisa checked her display. "Granted, and tell Captain that if he tries any more fancy approach maneuvers, I'll have him scrubbing plasma conduits for a month." Her tactical officer, Lieutenant, suppressed a smile. "Yes, ma'am." The Defender slid into position, and Lisa allowed herself a moment of pride. The Assembly believed humans could never match galactic military technology. They were right. Human weapons were cruder, human shields were weaker, human engines were slower. But human ships had something else. They had crews of hundreds instead of dozens. They had manual backup systems for every automated function. They had redundancies layered upon redundancies, fail-safes built into fail-safes. Where galactic vessels relied on elegant perfection, human ships relied on stubborn refusal to die. It was not pretty, but it worked. Down on Earth, the preparations took a different form. Doctor stood in a vast underground chamber in the Nevada desert, watching robots assemble the largest structure humanity had ever attempted. The Ark, they called it. A generation ship designed to carry 50 million people into the unknown. The ship was 3 miles long and a mile wide. Its hull was made from metals that humanity had invented specifically for this purpose. Its engines burned fuel that would not exist for another decade without the desperate work of 1,000 scientists. It was impossible, impractical, and absolutely necessary. "The systems are testing at 97.6% efficiency," her assistant reported. "That's up from last week." Shook her head. "Not good enough. We need 99% or people die in their sleep." Doctor, at this scale, that level of efficiency has never been achieved. "Then we achieve it now." Turned to face her assistant directly. "Somewhere out there, a mother is going to trust us with her children. She's going to kiss them goodbye and watch them go into the freezing chambers, believing that we'll wake them up on the other side. I will not let her down. Figure it out." The assistant hurried away to relay her orders. Turned back to the Ark, its massive frame filling her vision. The ship was a backup plan, a desperate measure for the worst possible outcome. If the fleet was destroyed, if the new colonies failed, if everything went wrong, this vessel would carry humanity's last hope into the cosmic darkness. She prayed they would never need it. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Ambassador Daniel Harper had returned to Prime. The Assembly had stripped him of his diplomatic credentials, so he could not enter the official chambers. Instead, he stood in a public plaza, handing out small devices to any alien who would accept them. Most walked past without stopping. A few took the objects out of curiosity, examining them with claws and tentacles and appendages that humans had no names for. "What is this?" a merchant asked. His species resembled giant squids, their bodies wrapped in colorful silks that indicated their social status. "A gift," Daniel replied. "Press the button and you'll see a message from Earth." That was suspicious, but curiosity won. He pressed the button and a hologram bloomed in the air between them. A human child appeared, perhaps 7 years old. She had brown skin and curly black hair and a gap-toothed smile that seemed too large for her face. She waved at the camera with obvious excitement. "Hi, my name is Emma and I live in a place called Oregon. I heard that we have to leave and I wanted to say goodbye. My mom says that you probably have kids too and I hope they're nice. Maybe someday we can be friends. Thank you for watching." The hologram faded. The stared at the empty space where it had been, his tentacles trembling slightly. "Why would you show me this?" he demanded. "Because your assembly voted to exile monsters," Daniel said quietly. "I wanted you to see what you were actually banishing." He walked away, leaving the merchant standing in the plaza with Emma's smile burned into his memory. The devices spread faster than anyone expected. They were shared, transmitted across networks that the assembly could not control. Emma's face appeared on screens throughout galactic civilization, her innocent message raising questions that no one wanted to answer. High Arbiter received reports of the phenomenon and dismissed them as irrelevant. The exile was proceeding as planned. The humans would be gone within months, and the galaxy would forget they had ever existed. He did not understand what he was dealing with. Back on Earth, Admiral reviewed the final preparations. The fleet was nearly ready. The colonies were nearly empty. The Ark was nearly complete. "We're ahead of schedule," reported. "We can leave in 3 months." Looked out her window at the night sky, at stars that humanity would soon abandon forever. "Then we leave in 2. I want us gone before they expect it. I want them to wake up one morning and realize we've disappeared." That's ambitious. That's human. The gathering was almost complete, and when it was done, humanity would vanish from the galaxy that had rejected them. But they would not vanish quietly. The day of departure came with unexpected beauty. Earth hung in the darkness of space, blue and white and green, the only home humanity had ever known. Around it, stretching from the orbit of the moon to the distant edge of Mars, a fleet gathered. Ships of every size and shape, from massive cargo haulers to sleek warships to converted passenger liners, formed a river of light flowing toward the unknown. 743 vessels, 42 million people, everything humanity had left. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, the fleet's flagship. Around her, officers worked with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years. They had dreamed of it and feared it and prepared for it in ways that civilians would never understand. Now it was here. "All vessels report ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. Nodded slowly. "Open a channel to the fleet." "Channel open, ma'am." She had written a speech. She had worked on it for weeks, trying to find the perfect words to mark this moment in human history. She had memorized every line, practiced every pause. Now, standing here with the weight of humanity on her shoulders, she threw it all away. "This is Admiral," she said. "I'm not going to give you a history lesson. You don't need one. You know why we're here. You know what the galaxy has decided about us. You know what we've chosen to do about it." She paused, looking at the faces around her. Young men and women, barely out of their 20s, who had volunteered for a mission that might kill them all. The assembly looked at us and saw something they feared. They saw a species that grows too fast, learns too quickly, asks too many questions. They decided we were too dangerous to keep around, too young, too aggressive, too human. She smiled slightly. They were right to fear us, not because we're violent, though we can be, not because we're ambitious, though we are. They were right to fear us because we refuse to accept limits that others impose on us, because we don't give up, because we don't stop, because when someone tells us we can't do something, we find a way to do it anyway. The bridge was utterly silent. 1,000 years ago, we were dying from diseases we couldn't even see. 500 years ago, we were killing each other over patches of dirt. 100 years ago, we hadn't even left our own planet. And now here we are, about to journey farther than any human has ever traveled, to build something new in a place no one else wanted. She straightened, her voice growing stronger. The galaxy voted to exile us. We voted to become something greater. Today, we begin the longest journey our species has ever taken. Some of us will not survive it. Some of us will never see the new worlds we're traveling toward. But our children will, and their children after them. And 1,000 years from now, when the assembly is dust and memory, humanity will still be out there among the stars. She took a breath. Follow me. I promise you this. We will build something out there that makes everything we left behind look like a prelude. All ships, prepare for synchronized jump. She cut the channel. On every vessel in the fleet, crews heard her words and felt something shift inside them. Fear remained, but it was joined now by something else. Pride, determination, a fierce refusal to let this be the end. Navigation, said quietly, set course for the void march. Maximum sustainable speed. Course set, Admiral. All ships jump on my mark. She looked out the window at Earth one final time. She had been born there, in a small town in Korea that no longer existed. Her parents were buried there. Her first love had died there, in a car accident that seemed impossibly mundane now. She would never see it again. Mark. The fleet jumped. 743 ships vanished from human space in a single synchronized moment. 1 second they were there, lights blazing against the darkness. The next, they were gone, leaving nothing behind but empty orbits and abandoned stations. On Earth, those who could not leave watched the sky. Billions of people stood in streets and parks and on rooftops, looking up at the stars. Some wept, some cheered. Most simply stood in silence, witnessing the largest migration in the history of their species. Doctor was among them. The Ark would not launch for another year, when its systems were fully tested and its passenger list was complete. Until then, she had to keep working, keep preparing, keep believing that humanity's backup plan would never be needed. But she allowed herself this moment. She stood on a hillside in Nevada, watching the sky darken as the fleet departed. Godspeed, she whispered, build something beautiful. At Prime, the departure was observed, with a very different reaction. High Arbiter convened the assembly in emergency session. The great chamber filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all demanding to know what had happened. The humans have left ahead of schedule, announced. They have departed 3 months before the deadline. Our sensors lost contact with their fleet approximately 4 hours ago. They appear to be heading toward the outer rim, beyond the borders of civilized space. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was not what anyone had expected. The humans were supposed to resist, to beg, to desperately try to negotiate their way back into galactic society. They were not supposed to simply leave. Good riddance, the delegate declared. His species resembled giant insects, their exoskeletons gleaming with oily iridescence. Let them die in the void. The galaxy is better without them. Agreed, the representative added. The exile was necessary. We have removed a threat before it could fully develop. But not everyone shared this sentiment. In the observer gallery, the merchant who had taken Ambassador Harper's gift sat in troubled silence. He had watched Emma's hologram dozens of times now. He had shown it to his children, his friends, his colleagues. None of them could explain why a 7-year-old human girl made them feel so uncomfortable. Maybe someday we can be friends, she had said. And now she was gone, along with millions like her, traveling into a darkness that the assembly had never bothered to explore. The merchant looked down at the celebrating delegates and felt something cold settle in his stomach. It felt like a mistake. It felt like the beginning of something terrible. But he said nothing. What could he say? The vote was complete, the exile was done, humanity was gone. In the void between stars, the fleet traveled on. The journey would take 8 months at maximum speed. 8 months of darkness, of isolation, of uncertainty. 8 months for people to wonder if they had made the right choice, if they would ever find a new home, if humanity would survive at all. But on every ship, in every cabin, in every crowded cargo hold where families huddled together, something remarkable was happening. People were not falling apart. They were coming together. They were sharing stories, teaching children, planning for a future that did not yet exist. A young woman named Emma Martinez, no relation to the commander, sat in the common area of a transport ship, reading to a group of children. The book was an old one, a paper copy that had been in her family for generations. It told the story of human explorers crossing a vast ocean to find a new world. Were they scared? One of the children asked. Yes, Emma admitted. They were very scared, but they went anyway. Why? Emma smiled, the same gap-toothed smile that another Emma was famous for across the galaxy. Because that's what humans do, she said. We go anyway. And the fleet sailed on, carrying humanity toward its destiny. The fleet had arrived at its destination after 8 months of travel through empty space. They had found 3 habitable worlds, just as the probes had promised. They had named them New Terra, Horizon, and Haven, and they had begun the long work of building a new civilization from nothing. It was brutal work. The first year killed thousands. Equipment failed, crops died, diseases spread through crowded settlements. People who had lived in comfortable homes on Earth found themselves sleeping in tents on alien soil, eating food that tasted wrong, breathing air that smelled of nothing familiar. But they survived, they adapted, they built. Governor Price stood on the balcony of her office in Phoenix, the capital city of New Terra. Below her, the city spread across a valley that had been empty wilderness just 3 years ago. Now it held 500,000 people, living in buildings designed by human architects and constructed by human hands. The city looked nothing like anything on Earth. The buildings were taller and thinner, designed for a planet with slightly lower gravity. The streets curved in patterns that followed the natural contours of the land. Parks filled every available space, their trees and flowers imported from Earth's genetic libraries and adapted for this new world. It was beautiful, it was home. Governor, the council is ready for you. Nodded at her aide. I'll be there in a moment. She allowed herself 1 more minute on the balcony, watching the sun set behind mountains that had no names in any Earth language. When she had left Earth, she had been a junior administrator in the colonial service, nobody important, nobody special. Now she governed a world. The council meeting was about trade, not with the Galactic Assembly, which had forbidden all contact with exiled species, but with the scattered civilizations that existed beyond Assembly control. Rogue nations, exiled species, the cosmic outcasts who had found their own paths through the darkness. The delegation has arrived, Admiral reported. She had retired from active command 2 years ago, but she still served as humanity's primary military advisor. Her hair was white now, her movements slower, but her mind was as sharp as ever. What do they want? Asked. What everyone wants. Technology. Our agricultural systems are better than theirs. Our medical technology is more advanced. Our manufacturing processes are more efficient. Smiled slightly. It turns out that necessity really is the mother of invention. 5 years of desperate survival has pushed us further than 50 years of comfortable galactic membership ever did. There were a reptilian species that had been exiled 4 centuries ago for refusing to surrender their weapons development to Assembly control. They had built their own small civilization in the outer darkness, surviving through stubbornness and isolation. Now they wanted to be friends. Make the deal, decided, and invite them to send a permanent ambassador. We should start building relationships with other exiles. We're going to need allies. This had become humanity's strategy. They could not challenge the Assembly directly. They were too small, too young, too far from galactic centers of power. But they could build something else. They could create a network of connections with the species that the Assembly had rejected, the civilizations that had been deemed unworthy of galactic citizenship. It was working. On Haven, the third colony world, Doctor had finally completed her life's work. The Ark had arrived 2 years after the main fleet, carrying its cargo of frozen dreamers across the vast emptiness between stars. 50 million people, preserved in cryogenic sleep, the largest single migration in human history, stood in the revival center, watching the first group of sleepers wake up. They opened their eyes slowly, confused and disoriented, struggling to understand where they were. "Welcome to Haven," she told each of them. "You're safe, you made it." Most of them cried. Some laughed. A few simply stared at the alien sky visible through the windows, unable to process what had happened. Understood, she had felt the same way when she first arrived. "What do we do now?" one woman asked. She was clutching a photograph of her children who had traveled on a different ship and were waiting for her in the settlement. "Now we build," said. "Now we make this place home." Back in assembly space, the absence of humanity was beginning to create unexpected problems. The humans had been junior members of galactic civilization, barely significant in the grand scheme of things, but they had filled niches that no one else wanted. They had served as mediators between species that refused to communicate directly. They had taken on dangerous missions that more established species considered beneath them. They had provided a flexibility and adaptability that the galaxy had taken for granted. Now they were gone, and things were starting to fall apart. Trade routes that humans had maintained began to deteriorate. Diplomatic channels that humans had facilitated went silent. Research projects that humans had contributed to stalled without their input. And Emma's message kept spreading. Ambassador Harper's gift had been thousands of times. The little hologram of the gap-toothed girl appeared on screens across the galaxy, asking her simple question over and over. "Maybe someday we can be friends." The assembly tried to suppress it. They declared the message propaganda, banned its distribution, punished anyone caught sharing it. But it kept spreading, passed from hand to claw to tentacle in secret, a reminder of what the galaxy had chosen to exile. High Arbiter convened a special session to address the phenomenon. "This human manipulation must stop," he declared. "It is destabilizing public sentiment. It is undermining confidence in the Assembly's decision." "How do you propose we stop it?" the delegate asked. He had been one of the few voices speaking against the exile, and his opposition had only grown stronger over the years. "It is a child saying goodbye. What law does that violate? It is designed to create sympathy for a dangerous species." "Then perhaps we should ask ourselves why it works." The tentacles curled in a gesture that indicated deep frustration. "Perhaps we should ask why a 7-year-old human girl makes us feel guilty for our vote." Had no answer. In the human colonies, life continued to improve. New Terra had grown from a collection of desperate settlements to a functioning civilization. Schools taught children who had been born on the journey, the first generation of humans who would never know Earth as home. Factories produced goods that equaled or surpassed anything the assembly could make. Hospitals saved lives using techniques that human doctors had invented out of necessity. And the military grew stronger. Admiral had spent 5 years building a fleet that could protect humanity's new home. 200 warships now patrolled the borders of human space, their crews trained to fight enemies that had not yet appeared. Defense platforms orbited every inhabited world. Early warning systems stretched for light years in every direction. "We're not ready for a full-scale war with the Assembly," admitted during a briefing with Governor Price. "We may never be, but we can make ourselves too expensive to attack. We can ensure that any aggressor pays a price that outweighs any possible gain." Nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think they'll come?" "Eventually. When they realize what we're building out here, they'll have to respond. The question is whether they'll try to destroy us or negotiate with us." And if they try to destroy us, smile was cold. Then we show them what humanity is capable of when we have nothing left to lose. 5 years after the exile, humanity was no longer dying. It was growing, learning, building, preparing. And somewhere in the back of their minds, every human knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had voted to exile them, but the final vote had not yet been cast. 10 years after the exile, a signal emerged from the void march. It came without warning, broadcast on frequencies that every spacefaring species could receive. The message contained no words. It was simply an image, the seal of the united human colonies, showing Earth cradled by 12 stars with the words per ad inscribed beneath. Through hardship to the stars. The assembly convened in emergency session, demanding answers. How had the humans developed faster-than-light communication across such vast distances? What were they planning? What did this signal mean? 3 days later, they got their answer. A human ship appeared at the edge of assembly space. It was not a warship. It was a small diplomatic vessel, sleek and silver, broadcasting peaceful intentions on every frequency. It requested permission to approach Prime. Permission was. The ship came anyway. Ambassador Grace had been chosen for this mission because she was everything the Assembly expected humans not to be. She was 32 years old, calm, patient, soft-spoken. She had never raised her voice in anger. She had never made a threat. She was also the most dangerous diplomat humanity had ever produced. Grace landed her shuttle in the same public plaza where Ambassador Harper had distributed his gifts 10 years earlier. Security forces surrounded her immediately, weapons drawn, demanding to know her intentions. She simply stood there, hands folded, expression serene. She waited. Hours passed. The security forces grew uncomfortable. They had been trained to handle threats, not someone who refused to be threatening. Finally, a delegation from the assembly arrived, led by an official whose name Grace did not recognize. "You are in violation of exile terms," the official announced. "I am," Grace agreed pleasantly. "I have come to violate them further." She held up a small data chip. It gleamed in the alien sunlight. "This contains technical specifications for a new jump drive technology. It is approximately 3 times more efficient than anything currently in galactic use. We developed it over the past decade, during our exile. We are offering it freely to any species that wishes to establish diplomatic relations with our colonies." The official stared at her. "That's impossible. You have only been gone 10 years. Such advancement would require centuries." "It would require centuries if you had other priorities. We did not." Grace smiled slightly. "When survival is your only goal, you accomplish things that comfortable civilizations cannot imagine." She set the chip on the ground between them. "We are not asking to return," she continued. "We don't want to. We have built something better out there, something that belongs only to us. But we remember that not everyone in this assembly voted against us. We remember the species that spoke in our defense, that questioned the exile, that took our ambassador's gifts, and wondered if perhaps a mistake had been made." Her voice hardened slightly. "For those species, our doors are open. For the rest of you, this is simply notice. We exist. We thrive. We will be here long after your assembly crumbles into dust. You tried to end our story. Instead, you wrote its greatest chapter." Grace turned and walked back to her shuttle. No one stopped her. No one knew how. Within hours, the chip's contents had been analyzed and the technology was real. It was revolutionary, and it was being offered for free to anyone willing to deal with humanity. The assembly called another emergency session. High Arbiter demanded that the technology be rejected, that anyone who dealt with humans be expelled from galactic civilization. But the vote did not go his way. Within a month, 47 species had opened secret communications with the human colonies. Within a year, 7 had formally withdrawn from the assembly to join what was already being called the Free Alliance. They were first. Their ambassador arrived on New Terra carrying Emma's hologram device, the same one that the merchant had received from Harper a decade earlier. "We should have listened," he said during his first meeting with Governor Price. "We should have known that a species capable of producing such a child was not our enemy." "You know now," replied, "that's what matters." The alliance grew quickly. The joined, bringing their military expertise. The brought their scientific knowledge. The brought their diplomatic networks. One by one, species that had been exiled or marginalized or simply forgotten found their way to humanity's doorstep. And they were welcomed. Admiral, now 83 years old and using a wheelchair, attended the first full summit of the Free Alliance. She sat in the back of the chamber, watching representatives from 24 species discuss trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Commander Lisa Martinez sat beside her. Lisa had risen through the ranks over the decade, becoming one of humanity's most respected military leaders. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lisa asked quietly. Shook her head. "I imagined survival. I imagined building a small civilization in the darkness, hoping we would be left alone. I never imagined this. The galaxy is changing because of us." "No," his voice was firm. "The galaxy is changing because of them." She pointed at the delegates. "We gave them somewhere to go, but they made the choice to come." On Haven, Doctor watched the news from her hospital bed. She was dying, her body finally giving out after decades of work that had pushed her far beyond normal limits. But she was content. Her granddaughter sat beside her, holding her hand. The girl was 12 years old, born on Haven, a citizen of a world that had helped create. "Grandma, is it true? Did you really build the Ark?" "I had help," smiled weakly. "Many people worked on it, I just happened to be in charge." "You saved 50 million people." "They saved themselves. I just gave them a way to do it." The girl was quiet for a moment. "What happens now?" Looked at the ceiling, thinking about everything she had seen. The exile, the journey, the desperate years of building, the slow transformation of survival into success. "Now we keep going," she said finally. "That's what humans do, we keep going." She died 3 days later, peacefully, surrounded by family. Her memorial service was broadcast across all 3 colony worlds, watched by millions who owed their lives to her work. Governor Price gave the eulogy. "Never wanted to be remembered as a hero," said. "She just wanted to do her job. She wanted to solve problems, build things, make sure people were safe. She didn't care about glory or recognition. She cared about results." Paused, looking out at the crowd. 10 years ago, the galaxy voted to exile us. They thought they were condemning us to death. They thought they were removing a threat. They were wrong. They weren't removing a threat. They were creating an opportunity. Her voice grew stronger. Because of Lisa Martinez and Daniel Harper and Cole and everyone else who refused to give up, humanity did not die in the darkness. We built something new. We built something better. We built a future that belongs to us. She smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. The galaxy voted to exile us. Humanity did not wait for approval. And now, 10 years later, we stand here as proof of what our species is capable of. Not despite our exile, but because of it. Raised her hand in a gesture that had become traditional in the colonies. Per ad through hardship to the stars. Today, tomorrow, and forever. The crowd repeated the words, their voices rising together. In the darkness between galaxies, humanity's signal continued to broadcast. The seal of the United Human Colonies shone like a beacon, visible to anyone with the technology to receive it. A message and a warning, a greeting and a promise. We are here, we survived, we are building something new. And we are just getting started.